Good morning, everybody. Are you all sitting down and ready for another wonderful get-together and meeting? It's good to see so many people out today. First of all, I would like to welcome you all, dear members, but also the new people who are joining us and also the guests. So I know Ruth has a guest that she would like to introduce. And Ruth, would you please, Ruth and Jim?
And Brent Cass. They're hoping to join at some point, so they're just here today to check us out.
Thank you, Ruth. And I think there's someone else, Ruth Thatcher.
I have two guests. I have Joyce Taylor and Millie Wallace. They're guests today, and they're thinking they might join us. Yes.
Thank you, Ruth. And Ruth, it's so great to have you back. You have not been that well, and you've been playing some real tricks on your health, and I'm really glad to see you here. We all have missed you, so I hope you continue to be good, behave, which is kind of impossible for you. I'd like to ask anyone else. Yes?
May I make an announcement? We are on Zoom and we have people at home and they cannot hear you if you do not use this microphone. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And thank you for all the work you're doing, David, to get this plan to work. I know there's some very positive messages saying how much the people who cannot be here today or at any meeting are enjoying what you're trying to do for them. So thank you. Are there any other guests? Are there any other new members? I think Jackie. Where are you, Jackie? Oh, you're way back there. Come on up and let me know who you've got. As you're coming up, last month I announced Mr. David Corkle was supposed to come up and introduce himself. He was not here last month. It doesn't look as though he's here this month. And I'm under the impression there's no such person as David Corkle, because I'm sure he would be very, very anxious and pleased to join us. But we'll give him one more month. Now, Jackie, what are you up to?
Okay. I guess I have to talk into this, David?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Okay, so we have some new members to have come up today and do their Who Am I introduction. And I'm going to ask them to come up, and I printed it off in case you don't have your copy. So I'm looking for Robin Reed, Ruth Nodwell, and Dave Nodwell. And Miriam Page is supposed to do hers today, but she's not here. So if you fall into that category, could you come on up here, please? And while we're waiting for folks to come up, I just wanted to let everybody know that there's some people here who are missing name tags. Did you bring the new bag of name tags that I dropped off?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
I gave it to Liz.
Okay, I am so sure that I had name tags made for the people who... Anyway, I will look at my name tag list and get more name tags. So what happens is we wait till we have about 10 and then we order more. It's just the way it works. So you have name tags coming if you don't have one. And if you haven't been asked to do your little blurb, it's because what we're trying to do is catch up on everybody. So I'm sort of sending out emails to 8 members at a time and looking for returns, and then we invite you to join us so we can get to know all the new people that have joined us recently, and it's been a big number. Come on up.
Is it David? David, I know your wife, Ruth, is not able to come this morning.
Correct.
I hope she's all right.
She's on the mend.
Is she? Well, hopefully next month you'll be able to get together. Here you are. Just speak right in.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. And as you heard, my wife regrets not being able to be here today, but she will be here at the next meeting. And what this means is I get to do my version of my own welcome or presentation. So anyway, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, the following is a brief and albeit somewhat biased summary of who I am. So despite growing up in the city of Halifax, I have direct roots in the Guelph area. Going back to 1830, in fact, an ancestor of mine was the first drowning victim in the town of Erin in 1867 or something like that. I don't know how he managed to do that, but he did. I started my career in horticulture, and from there it just naturally progressed into emergency management and nuclear safety. And I retired in 2019 as the Director of Emergency Management for the province of Ontario, and a week later started doing contract work with the International Atomic Energy Agency throughout Europe and the United Arab Emirates. Ruth and I left Guelph in 2009, quite frankly because I got tired of driving to Toronto at dark 30 every morning. And for the last 8 years, we lived on a small farm in the Northumberland Hills, so east of Toronto, around where the Big Apple is. The move back to Guelph, we came back in October. It had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I was the president of the Coburn Curling Club, and the only way to get out of that job was to move. I am an avid photographer, and so if you see some weird guy out in the middle of the Speed River in the middle of winter trying to get that perfect shot, it's probably me. I've had some recognition for my work, including a first place with the McMichael Gallery plein air competition in 2020. But the only other claim to fame that I have is restoring a derelict 1952 Ford 8N tractor when I had never mechanicked anything in my life. So I was quite pleased about that. I haven't addressed family. I'll let my wife do that next month when we're back. So pleased to be a member of PROBUS. Thank you very much.
Is Robin here? Robin Reed? Oh, come on up, Robin. Do you need this?
I brought mine, but you have it. That's terrific.
Right on.
Good morning, friends. That's a tough act to follow. My name is Robin Reed, and I live here in Guelph. I've lived here in Guelph for the past 30 years. I'm 67 years old. Actually, I'm going to be 68 at the end of the month, so I'm not sure whether to say I'm 67 or 68. And I'm married with no children. I was adopted in West Germany, but no, I don't speak German. My parents actually were Scottish immigrants. They happened to be in the Air Force and were stationed there, and that's how they ended up with me. I have moved around quite a bit when I was younger and before I met my husband. I've lived in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, and for a brief time in Beaumont, Texas. But I have lived in Guelph, as I said, for about 30 years now. I do enjoy traveling and visited areas of the United States, Europe, and of course Canada. A friend introduced me to the Bruce Trail many years ago, and the two of us would make regular trips to Lion's Head and surrounding areas of the Grey Bruce counties to hike the trails. We really enjoyed not going in the summer, but actually in winter, the fall, early spring, because then it was just us, not very many people. Hiking is something I really, really enjoy. I also enjoy camping, although I haven't had the opportunity to go camping in a number of years. One hiking and camping trip was to the Canadian Rockies for 10 days. We started out near Lake Louise and headed towards Banff. We carried all our food, all our bedding, tents for the full 10 days, and saw less than 10 people the whole time. And I look back on that trip and I think, wow, that was a really amazing, amazing trip. So I do like camping. Another interest I have is in drawing landscapes. I like to use pencils and water-soluble pencils. I'm not the greatest at drawing, so I stick to landscapes. I do take Bible studies through my church and have met some interesting people that way, and I do some volunteer work at my church as well. I'm currently a member of the Guelph Wellington Senior Association and enjoy going on day excursion throughout the Southern Ontario. It's another way to meet people. I am retired from Wilfrid Laurier University. I was the employment and career advisor to the MBA students and alumni. I hope that gives you somewhat of an idea of who I am, and I'm looking forward to meeting more of you and getting to know you. Thank you.
That is all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all of you new people. I know you'll enjoy being members of PROBUS. Before I introduce Kathy, I would like to ask Barb Moldenhauer to come up to say a couple of words. Was that?
You said that was an easy name.
Well,
Moldenhauer.
well, did I pronounce it correctly?
Perfectly.
She knows I'm very sensitive.
No, I'll be brief. This is on behalf of the Activities Committee and Catherine Collins in particular. She's looking for hostesses for the gathering. Now, the gathering is a really great opportunity to meet new friends, and it's the third Tuesday of the month, and we meet for, what is it, Catherine? Canapes, cocktails, and conversation. In individual homes. So if you would consider being a hostess, that would be wonderful. And you can talk to me or talk to Catherine Collins. Just let us know. So hostesses for the gathering coming up in March. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am now going to ask Kathy Stevens to come up and give us a little bit of a background of what has been going on in her boring, tedious life.
Well, have you ever had a bad day followed by a miracle? I have. You know, Beth Harris is on our committee, and every month she goes and she gets all the goodies for our refreshments. Well, she is on a cruise, thankfully, and so that was my job. So I go yesterday to get the goodies at Costco. You know what that's like. And as I was driving home, this little sign came up, lift ajar. Well, the lift ajar is the back lift of the car. So I tried and tried to open it, and I couldn't. So I came home and I got my husband, and he tried and couldn't. So we had to crawl head first into the car and into the back and get the goodies out. Well, this morning, he left early to take the car to see what was wrong. And he came in and he said, the battery's dead. Well, the battery died because of whatever I did to not shut the door or not open it. So that was the first bad thing. When he was outside, I get an email and I just think, oh, I better check that. And it's our speaker. I've been away and I just got word that some of my friends have COVID. So I said, where do you live? And she said, where she did, and I said, I'll be there in 10 minutes because you don't have a test kit. So I went to her place. She met me in the parking lot, and I handed over the test kit. 10 minutes later, I'm on my way here, and this is about 10 after 8. So I'm on my way here, and I get a call from her. She's really upset. I've got COVID. In the meantime, I'm thinking, what are we going to do? Well, I had a few options, but the one option, which was the miracle, was I talked to our technicians on the phone, and they came in early, and we're actually going to have, for the very first time ever, our speaker on the screens. Her name is Queen, and without the technicians, we'd have been really messed up. So thank you. One thing is that when we are having the question time, David has already mentioned about that microphone, so that Queen can hear the questions, you must use that microphone, and David will be passing it around. So that's the bad day, and that's the miracle. Thank you for understanding.
You're wonderful. Thank you very much. Dory McLean, are you here? Would you like to introduce the speaker?
Good morning, members and guests, and of course, Queen. Good morning to you. And I don't know if you're seeing my back or my front. What's happening here? Because I should be addressing you as well. I read an article in the Wellington Observer. Oh, stay with the mic? Okay, thank you. I read an article in the Wellington Observer about a woman who is one of the top 100 female Black entrepreneurs in Canada, and it's Queen. And I was delighted. I thought, PROBUS and I have got to meet this woman. And further information led me to believe that she's a remarkable woman. And she is going to tell us her story, and it's entitled, Life of a Woke Black Girl. Queen will tell stories of her experiences of racism, discrimination growing in Guelph, and how it brought her to become leader of the BLM, Black Lives Matters, protests. She's a business owner and an executive director for a nonprofit, and she has so many accomplishments, but I can't go into all of them. But Queen's self-discovery explores the dimensions of living and growing up in a white society while drawing connections to art, equality, and the multifacets of the hat she wears. While her life may not be a runaway show, it's a real opportunity to a real lived experience of both grief and joy while growing in your understanding of Black culture and history. Will you welcome now, Queen?
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I have to start off by saying what a miracle, and thank you to the whole team who has put this together so last minute in what seems to be a devastating state for myself. I feel great and fine and active, so I'm actually really excited to be here speaking to you. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. Maybe I can get like a hands up because I feel like I can see everyone. Oh, this is the best. I feel like I could do head, shoulders, knees, and toes right now with everyone, and I would get a really good, clear picture. I can't hear y'all, so anytime you just want to like raise hands and feel like you want to give me something good, I can see your back of your heads, which is really amazing. I have a great view. And overall, I am feeling okay. So I am really excited to be here. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for all the work from Harcourt Tech and Kathy and the team for all of this and running to my house and helping me. I feel so taken care of. And I think that is something that we'll get back to at the end of this conversation, is just the root of community in Guelph and why that's brought me here and why I love Guelph and have stayed here. So to start off, my name is Queen. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. I'm just going to get in around some stories and experiences. I've set a little bit of a timer for myself, so I will watch and keep note. And in the chat, if there is any tech or anything, just please let me know for sure. I know we're doing this for the first time and we're all doing this together, so thank you. So at the young age of 10 years old, I was pushed off the jungle gym and called the N-word. I was removed from the school that happened at. And the next school I went to, I was constantly bullied for the richness of my melanin, the form of my curls, the way I just seemed different from everyone around me. I grew up in Guelph with white parents, with white siblings, in a very Christian white school, where my whole identity for myself was about the way I looked. I constantly struggled to see myself not only in the media, but by the representation around me that wasn't in my own home even. I remember shaving off my eyebrows to look more like Whoopi Goldberg because I finally saw someone who looked like me when I had watched the movie Coraline, if anyone knows that movie out there. And yes, Whoopi Goldberg has no eyebrows. If you've never noticed, now you will. But it was my way to find an identity and a connection to someone who looked like me. Of course, since then, I have grown back my eyebrows, but I did run away from home in several different forms. I found my way moving to different cities. I traveled several different countries, and I did everything that I could to disconnect from Guelph, from my experiences here, from medical to police altercations. And of course, I never told these things to my family. Not ever. I thought it would be maybe too fragile of a conversation, and I didn't know if they would actually understand me. I now know conversations. I also later realized that my voice and my work would be the exact thing that brings me back to Guelph. I like to call this the boomerang city. No matter how hard you try, you just boomerang right back to it. And it is because of the community that's here, willing to learn and willing to grow. And I apologize. The one thing that I am dealing with is I'm very thirsty right now with this. But luckily I'm not sneezing and coughing, so I'll take the drinks for now. And with my experiences, I went through a lot of different things, from medical racism to educational racism, and the list goes on and on. Even experiences at the medical offices telling me that people like me always come in here trying to lie about our pain. At that time, I was dealing with a fractured shoulder and a rotator cuff issue from a dance number that I was doing at times in school. And I've now gone through probably 3.5 years worth of physio. I'm also going to apologize ahead of time because we're Zoom. My cat might make a few appearances here and there, so I'll apologize for him immediately. He's really cute, but he likes the attention as well. And with this, I always felt like I was getting used by the system. I was getting questioned about my name, stopped and getting ID'd. I was being asked at the bank about my money and where it was coming from. I was getting constant pushback from the educational system on whether or not I should be in college or university when I had great marks and I was on the honor roll. I was pretty consistently targeted by Guelph police when I was a Black teen here, experiencing just walking down the street, jogging in the morning. I was quite an athlete then. I don't do all the jogging now. I still dance, but back then I was constantly jogging outside and I would be getting stopped and ID'd and I'd have to call my mom. And these experiences continued as I moved to Toronto, dealing with Peel and Toronto police. And I start off telling you these things because it's not even 2% of my experiences that I've gone through in my life as a Black woman in a world subjected to violence, oppression, and harm on a regular basis. And to be frank, it's not even a silver or a grain of sand in what our community has gone through. So I do want to preface as I continue speaking that I cannot speak for all, but I do my best to advocate and to educate. So Many of you know, and thank you for that beautiful introduction, talking about the Black Lives Matter protests back in 2020. It was what I call an historic moment, especially for me living through the time, what kind of looked like the civil rights movement, that looked like times that we had seen before. And for someone like myself, advocacy at that time looked very different. I think for many people, it can be hard to figure out where advocacy sits for ourselves. How do we show up? How do we encourage ourselves to get out? And sometimes that doesn't always look like protesting on the streets. And at that time, it looked like making posters for me. It looked like bringing water bottles out for people who needed them. I love to bake, so making cookies and bringing access to food for people was a really adequate part for me to show up in ways that I could. As I grew older, and as I continued my work, I did find myself falling in love with the social media atmosphere. As much I have a hate-love relationship with it, I did like that kind of role of creating posters and being able to help in marketing ways, even if I was sitting at home. Because while I am a very able body, I do deal with fibromyalgia and now 2.5 years dealing with concussion. So it does put me in positions where I'm not always able to be active and out. And I had to find roots of activism that looked different for me. So at that young age, I was still figuring myself out. And then Trayvon Martin happened. And it's wild to me that it has been 11 years now since Trayvon Martin in 2013. And this was a really big turning point for our community. We had known that Black bodies, particularly male bodies, were being harmed and murdered by police. But Trayvon Martin was a particularly specific time because it was filmed. And because that was filmed, it gave us accountability to hold on police officers and to hold for advocacy that could turn into action. And for myself, I think with advocacy work, that has to look like movable action, whether that is showing up, as I said, in the many facets that you could, or whether that is doing all the policy work in the background to make accountable change, like the Equality Act. We could really use that in Canada to ensure that Black and Indigenous people would have equal rights adequately and then could hold accountability for racist or injustice issues that do come up. And for me, Trayvon Martin was a really standout position for me because I felt like I had to raise my voice a little bit more. And I was really blessed to be in a community and living in Toronto where I could march and I could stand up and there was community around me. At that time, Black Lives Matter was very big in the States, but hadn't really made its, I guess, movement into Canada, particularly in the route that we saw in 2020. But there was a lot of action happening in Toronto. And so I got to learn from these really great leaders like Desmond Cole that we see now, if anybody has read any of his books, and such leaders who continued advocating for policy change and for rights and for access and for injustices that were happening. So for me, that was a really turning point for me to get educated because I truly believe all of us have space to grow, including myself. There were many things I didn't know at that point. I was such a little bean looking back on the things that I've learned now. I think about Jack and the Beanstalk and that little bean that grew. That's kind of how I consider myself and how I consider us as we grow through equity work. But then that movement continued. And I really had a point in my life where I got to enjoy musical theater school. I have done a lot of really wonderful things. I got an agent. I did a lot of roles and really joyous things that I like to talk about as well through the harm and through the kind of injustices that were happening. I was also experiencing at that time a lot of advocacy that was happening in Toronto around cannabis amnesty, looking at the injustices that we're experiencing on Black bodies while talking about what that looked like for people in their role, seeing how people took advocacy not only from regular conversations in their rooms, but taking it to Parliament, taking it to their local MPs, taking it to MPPs and councillors. These were things that I personally hadn't experienced or seen. I hadn't seen action like that happen outside of protesting and making my little signs and baked goods. So it was really a turning point for me again to get educated and fascinated in the roles that I needed to take. Now we move into 2020. This was again a turning point for me. We all know about George Floyd. we heard about Breonna Taylor. But for me, the murder of Regis Korchinski Paquette was it was a lot. She was a really good friend in our community. I am very, very blessed to work in what we call the Carnival community, which spreads Caribbean culture and dance and heritage. And she was very connected in that community. But she was also struggling deeply with mental health. And at that time, losing her was a huge grieving point for me. And on top of that, and I apologize, excuse me. On top of that, I had also lost a dear friend to suicide due to mental health crisis during COVID. All of that was kind of this immense burden of grief that evidently you can see I still sit with today. And I don't think for myself, there's really, for me, an endpoint to grief, which I think is okay. But I did find that I had to stand up for something in a different role. We were talking about George Floyd, we were talking about Breonna Taylor, but we weren't always having the conversations about Canadians that we were losing. Jamal Francis, and the names can go on and on that we lost throughout 2020 to 2021. The BLM protests, the Black Lives Matter protests had to happen. There was an evidently need for raising our voices and having injustices being talked about. And I think for myself, again, advocacy looked different for me. I needed to find a point where I could personally raise my voice and bring people together in a way that we could talk about what was happening around us. And we could also end with joy. And if you were at that protest, you would have seen that at the very end, we had music and dance and energy, because I truly believed that we couldn't just leave on grief. And that was maybe selfishly of me because I'm such an emotional being. But I found out that that movement was a turning point for activism. I knew the cat was going to make an appearance. This is what I knew. I absolutely knew. This is Ash. And it was a really amazing point for us because we saw protests not only happening in the United States, but in Canada, in the UK, in the Australia, we saw it in Germany. We saw these protests happening everywhere. People were listening and people were hearing us. And I felt seen and I felt heard. And I think what's important to me is that these conversations have continued, especially in Guelph. And thank you again for having me here, especially with all the craziness that led to this point. But I think that it reminds me at how willing people are and how willing people are to work against adversity. And I'm calling this a year of adversity because I feel like I'm going through it. And as so many are going through these years after we've experienced a pandemic. And then we experienced a pandemic of losing Black community. And we're seeing these kind of violence, oppression, and harm surrounding us. Like we could talk about wars and crimes that are going on everywhere all day. I would be here for hours. So I do recognize that advocacy can be really hard when we have so many injustices happening around the world. And where do you show up and how do you show up? I found myself really struggling through that idea, especially through 2022, as we were seeing kind of a shift in Black advocacy and anti-Black racism. Less grants, less fundraising opportunities, less kind of conversation, of course, less action of protest. And that was evidently because myself and many other of our activist communities, we're exhausted. We're depleted from, I did 20 protests in 2020. I did another 15 in 2021. On top of doing a lot of land reconciliation work with our Indigenous people at 1492 Land Back. A lot of that work was just stretching us so thin between, showing up every day protesting, making signs at home, and then showing up on lands that we were trying to protect for Indigenous people that didn't have water, that didn't have homes, that we were sitting in cars cold. Like we were just stretched thin. We were dealing with RCMP and police. We were dealing with watching Indigenous bodies being dragged by police officers and arrested. We were watching rubber bullets being attacked on our bodies as we defended people and as we defended lands. And I am so grateful, by the way, as a Black settler, to be here in Guelph and what we know as Dean Ave, which it would be as Indigenous land's name. And as a Black settler, I always recognize the ways we also need to show up as allyship for our Indigenous peoples. And watching the violence and the harm that we all went through during those years, we were stretched thin as we got to this last year. Not only the financial burden we're all experiencing, not to mention the real estate crisis we're all experiencing. We're seeing all these things that are happening to people, but we were seeing this kind of lack of action because we were exhausted. And we were working so diligently on policy change and talking about different bills and action. We have people like Ingrid Waldron out in Nova Scotia working on the environmental bill that is still sitting in the House of Commons. We have people working on trying to get our equity bill and getting that acknowledgement for kind of all access so we can hold that accountability that I spoke about. And we really wanted to also be able to maintain Black history and culture. And for many of you, you might know me from Guelph Black Heritage Society. And if you don't know me, you definitely need to check out Guelph Black Heritage Society. I am now, I was the executive director, but I have recently stepped back my role to a current board member. And the reason for that being is I really wanted to increase my work in my personal business, which is supporting Black-owned businesses here in Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. Just yesterday, we were part of kind of organizing these markets and having a conversation of how we can bring vendors to what we call Afrofest happening in June. And another festival called the Mel Brown Festival, if anyone has heard about that, that's happened for recent years. And seeing how we can bring vendors. We have over 75 Black-owned vendors that I get to work with this company of mine that we try to build within the community. So for me, evidently, that takes up a lot of time, but I still love the Guelph Black Heritage, and I do want to take some time to acknowledge the work that they do. And if you haven't heard about the Guelph Black Heritage, maybe people can put their hands up if they've heard about GBHS. Anyone in the, okay, yay, I love this. The GBHS is an amazing place. If you haven't experienced Heritage Hall, that is at 83 Essex Street. I highly recommend that you contact us first. We are not there all day. We are made up of completely volunteers who are really dedicated to Black history and culture. What I love about the building itself is that the building was built in 1880 by formerly enslaved individuals who came up here through the Underground Railroad. It was not a spot on the Underground Railroad, but it was a safe haven and a church that operated. And for me, seeing that building and being in it has this kind of energy. You feel your ancestors, you feel, the hands that built the building. So I was just in awe of this building. And now I will admit, it took me till I returned to Guelph to get to know the GBHS, and it has been operating now for over 12 years. I was that disconnected from Black community myself in Guelph. So finding this community here, thanks to people like Denise Francis, if anybody out there knows her, thanks to Denise Francis and so many others who brought me along to the GBHS, I was really introduced to so many things. And that's really got us opportunities. If people have ever had a tour at the Heritage Hall, and if you haven't, you still can. So there's lots of opportunities to book that. We also operate a March break camp called Co-Black, which gives youth, Black youth, and any other youth. It's really a Black-centered program, welcoming an all-exclusive environment for folks to come and learn Java and HTML. So it allows youth to build websites. I think this is so amazing in the digital age that we're in for youth to get really a foundation. And we also operate that during the summer as well. We additionally have some of our, Black History Month, and happy Black History Month, everyone. We do have our Black Heritage Month, which is a initiative run by Denise Francis, where we run our monthly events. So we do have a few happening coming up. If anyone's heard about our concert, that will be coming up on the 23rd. We're also having an open house on the 24th of February. So if anyone wants to come out, get a tour, get to know the GBHS, this is a great opportunity. I'll maybe make sure to email that to someone so that all that information can get sent out somewhere. Just let me know if that would be helpful at the end of this. We do have our Give a Cup fundraiser campaign, which is an opportunity to fundraise for our Heritage Hall. Now, this is not a cheap expense, but we do experience, of course, that struggle of getting grants and fundraisers going for Black-owned operating nonprofits and businesses. So any support for us would be great. We have driving tours now, if anyone has any interest in those, and audio tours. So there's lots to see, lots to learn at the GBHS. Again, I can always send over some more information about that as well. But I did want to pitch them a little bit and give that out to them. But again, as I mentioned, I did step back from the GBHS as my role as executive director. And it's not because I didn't love my role, but I did find that there was a time for me to flourish within my business and time to elevate my platform. Now, I own a company called the Queen Company, and the Queen Company is this amazing, I'm really proud of my company. I named it after myself, evidently. And really, the Queen Company is supporting events, entertainment, and education in Caribbean heritage and culture, and supporting Black-owned businesses. And we do this, whether that be through markets or whether that be through events like Multicultural Festival, or we even do weddings. So if you ever want to book me, just let me know. And we also do our entertainment. So we really like to encourage that entertainment and education can come together. So we go into a lot of schools, universities, and we bring in that education and awareness through our workshops. Just recently, we had the opportunity to go to the Grand Valley Women's Prison for their Ethno-Cultural Day, where they brought in a diverse group of performers to perform and create this beautiful day for inmates there. And it's really taught me a lesson in how dance can be storytelling, but it can also be very healing. So I really, truly am so proud of my company. We have grown our little dance squad started at 2 people, but we have grown to 15 now in the last year, which is incredible to see the culture being spread. Additionally, we do also have a component where we do a lot of our education pieces. As I mentioned, I do a lot of workshops around violence, oppression, and harm. I think that, equity, diversity, inclusion, we talk about this a lot. They're really cute words, but I don't think they get down to the root problem of some of the issues we're facing in our world. And that could look as simple as homelessness, mental health, when we're looking at violence at the different levels that it encompasses. How so many of these problems can sometimes get looked at as human problems when many of them are economic problems and social deterrent problems that we can be fixed by human compassion and care. So that's a little bit about my business. I co-own a dance studio called the Heels Academy with 2 of my beautiful business partners. A shout out to Michelle and Vanessa. And we really came up with that space because, again, I always find that dance was a healing area for me, bringing people together. And we have all walks of life there, from Black, Indigenous to queer community to moms, which I really love that our moms are coming out and getting their peace of mind. And even if that's for an hour and a half. And this was really about finding that space where people could just be free. People could just dance. People could just listen to good music. But you can come however you are. Come if you're grieving. Come if you're happy. Come if you're celebrating. We really wanted an opportunity for people to feel good about themselves. And that's really about so much of the work that I do. I think for so long, I lived under what I thought was this cloak of white supremacy. And I think that does exist, and we talk about it a lot. And we talk about the racism, and I could go on about the racist experiences that I have gone through. on and on. But I've also found out ways that I can navigate, and I found ways that we can build a Black community. I also found ways that we can build different families that look different. I absolutely love my adopted family. I think there was another beautiful speaker that spoke today. It said that they were adopted. So shout out to the adoptees in the room. And I have a beautiful relationship with my mother, and I nourish that. But I also found I could find a family within my Black community because I was looking not necessarily for my birth parents. That wasn't what I was looking for me personally. But I was looking and striving for heritage and culture. Toronto taught me a lot. Um, Dealing with police being arrested several times for just being ID'd on the street or walking, dealing with lawyers, having to go through those traumas over and over, having to call my mom and telling her what's going on. Like, that's not fun either. You can only imagine picking up the phone and telling your mom. And to that first experience being pushed off the jungle gym and being called the N-word. So much of my life experiences was wrapped in these moments where I was being told that I wasn't enough because of my skin color, because of the way I looked, because of the way I talked. Sometimes I wasn't Black enough for Black spaces. Sometimes I wasn't white enough for white spaces. And I felt myself in this limbo of these multifaceted experiences that I was going through. But I did find that I could create a community. And I found that in Guelph. And that wasn't just my Black community, but it was people like yourselves who were willing to listen to the stories that I had to tell, that were willing to march beside me during those protest days. There were so many people, like random people in Guelph, that would message me or, send me Uber meals and receipt, like people who would drop me off flowers, people that would just message and ask if I was doing okay, that didn't even know me. And I needed that because on top of that, we were dealing with, and not just myself, but the Guelph Black Heritage Society, we were dealing with threats. I had death threats. We had people posing online as Guelph Police Service trying to get my address to my home. I went through attacks where our cars got keyed. We had people who put feces all over the door of our Guelph Black Heritage. We've had phone calls of threats. We had numerous letters and emails. The way that the hatred showed up was so violent. We had a man with a knife show up at the GBHS on 2 occasions. And it was really hard to see that hate being fueled in Guelph when I knew that we were a community that could make a difference. And I knew that these stories could make a difference, like so many others out there who are sharing their stories. And there are so many others who can't share their stories because the trauma is so deep that we go through. A few months back, I had a community member, a Black community member, reach out to me because she was stopped at the bank at 7 p.m. By security. I also, 3 months ago, had a mom call me because her son was stopped here in Guelph while he was jogging on the street. And for me, that feels like a little defeating because you feel like you do all this work within the community. And we do have things and active change that is happening. And I don't want to take away from so many good people doing great work within the city and outside of this city. But it hasn't stopped some of like the racism and targeted hate that is happening to different people, whether that be Black bodies or brown bodies as we're experiencing during these times. I really felt like the ways that we could connect to people were telling our stories. whether they were hard or difficult, whether they were challenging. And I know that whether or not I've been through all these things, I still have come out on top in so many different ways. I do want to preface, we are a 3-time award-winning company for the Queen Company, and we only launched in June of 2020. And I'm very, very proud of my admin team and my dancers and my mom and my partner who always show up to help at every event and every occasion. Since then, I've been blessed to win Women of the Year, Women of Influence, Women of Inspiration, a top Black woman to watch in Canada. I'm now part of Forbes Black, which is an amazing opportunity for Black members to be part of the Forbes. And I was just recently, if you see my sash here, titled our first Canadian National Miss here in Canada, and one of our first Black, actually the first Black national pageant queen. And all these things aren't because I experienced racism. And I don't want that to be my story. All these things happened because I tried to push and navigate through the dimensions of living through the society that brought colonialism, that brought supremacy, that brought injustices, that brought the welfare system, that brought the Mohawk Institute and all the schools for our Indigenous children and what they experienced, that brought racism here. And when we talk about slavery, I do want to preface that the Underground Railroad was a two-way street. People in Canada were going back to the US to escape enslavement here too. So knowing that these stories and these things happened in our lands, and knowing that some of these experiences continue not only to me, but the youth here in Guelph that are calling me and telling me what's happened to them. That story wavers so deeply on our shoulders and is so burdened into the trauma that we experience, but it can't be my story when I see the successes that are able for our community. But it takes people like yourselves. It takes people like my mom, who has been doing so much anti-racism work, to show up. And it takes people having those kind of uncomfortable conversations like some of these can be, when we're talking about looking at these multifaceted ways that like colonialism has played a role on our bodies. I wish I could stand here and say that something I've done through 2020 was the miracle change to racism. I wish I could say that I think in my time that the work that I'll do will be the miracle change to racism, or be some miracle change to change the way certain people just view Black bodies. I don't think it will be in my time, but what I can tell you is I never, ever thought I'd see 2020 happen. I never, ever thought I would have conversations in my own home about what I was going through. I always thought I was going to keep that to myself. And it seems so silly now, not even telling my own mother about some of the things that I was experiencing and why I was going through them. Or even evidently growing up with my family and watching my mom go into a medical office and coming out with lots of smiles and giggles. And I'm walking in being told that my people come in all the time and look for a freebie. And there was numerous occasions that have happened. I felt like Guelph could be the change-making city, and I still think that it can be in many ways. I still think it has opportunities to work on what we have is a community plan to end systemic racism here. If anyone has heard about that, a big shout out to Marva Wisdom, who does a lot of work here for that. It takes a lot of us, but there isn't a lot of us here in our Black community. I think it's about 12% here in Guelph. So it means we need allyship. And for you, like I mentioned, that could show up in so many different ways. Just asking a speaker to come out and speak. Just showing up with baked goods. I love baked goods, by the way. Just if you want to, sit with someone and hear their story, if that, they need to vent to you. I think there's a lot of ways that we can just be listening instead of talking back. Perhaps, maybe that's not the right phrase that I'm using. And I think through the multifaceted hats that I've worn, I've learned a lot of experiences from those. And that's why I do want to give credit to those who have taught me, my ancestors who have led the way. But I still sit with a lot of pain. I sit with a lot of pain knowing that I've lost brothers and sisters who have worked hard for the cause. I have lost brothers and sisters who have just been picking up their cell phones outside of a house. I have lost brothers and sisters to mental health from just a phone call to police. And I've lost so many queer members and trans community members to just not being seen or heard, and the violent attacks from not only police, but other, community members outside of that are supposed to be there to protect each other, just as you protect me today. I'm in pain because every day I have to wake up remembering when I send out my partner, my beautiful, tall, Black man with long locks and dreads, if he's going to be okay. Those are the things we worry about. But between that, we do celebrate joy, like Black History Month. But Black History Month doesn't end at February. I'm not wearing it today, but I have a shirt that says I'm still Black March 1st. So that means I'm always available to talk. And I think, Kathy, you booked me for something else. So thank you. And that's because I think we do need to have these conversations all year round. We need to be aware. We need to celebrate. We need to honor. We need to have conversations around people like Gina Gustine. We need to have conversations around Viola Davis, really, really important Canadian Black leading women that have changed policy and politics. We do need to talk to those artists and support them. And that can be in any shape or form. And all Canadian artists, we all need the support out here these days. So I think there are different ways you can show up. There is a concert, I think on Friday, Dee Archer, if anyone knows her, big shout out to Dee Archer. She's performing at the River Run Center. I am not affiliated. I just love her. Love her work. So if you can go support her, you can head on to the River Run Center and have a date night or a girls' night out or whatever you want. Ways that you can support the Queen Company right now are in so many different ways, and that's just supporting the work that we're doing. We are celebrating on, it was going to be Sunday, but I'm sadly not going to be there. But my team will be there at the Rhythm and Blues event in Cambridge, which is a hair show, and they're going to be talking about all different hairstyles and doing some education events, which can be really, really interesting to learn about. As well as you can check us out at what's called the Legacy event, and it's called the Freedom Legacy Project. That's going to be held by Rufus. His name is Rufus John. If anyone knows his name, he is a beautiful artist of Mama's Kitchen in KW. And they're hosting a youth Black event. Last year was amazing. I was blown away. We will be hosting, so I'm really excited to be there. And by then, thankfully, I will not be sick. So I am really grateful for you. I am recognizing where my time is going and do want to leave time for any questions. And feel free if you want to ask those hard questions. I am the one. This is the space. We can create a safe and brave space for all of us. I do want to really thank you again for just taking time to listen, to work through my grief with me when I talk about these things. They're not necessarily easy for me. I do want to give thanks to all of you, to the Harcourt team, to Kathy, to everyone who might thank you for my introduction, Doris, and everyone for just moving through this and having me virtually. I do want to thank my beautiful team at TKC, my mama bear, who's always supporting me. And of course, my ancestors and God who just hold me down, because this is a miracle that we can at least be here together. So thank you so much for listening to me, hearing my story. my experiences, and hopefully you have some questions so that it's not just dead air. And I hopefully hear from some of y'all. But thank you so much, and I really appreciate y'all. Thank you, thank you.
I have the mic here, and contrary to appearances, Queen is not up here in the screens. Queen is in this little black box at the back of the theater, so if you want to look at her in the eye, look at the black box. Any questions? Do we have any questions from home? No.
Hi, Queen. This is kind of odd looking at this black box up on the wall here. I have a question, but I haven't really articulated the question in my mind yet, so bear with me a little bit. I came from a work environment where there was an anti-discrimination policy per se, and whether it was interpreted correctly or not, it was well-meaning, but the interpretation is that you would ignore differences, and I say that in terms in contrast to celebrating differences. And to put that into perspective, a number of years ago, I was on the subway in Toronto with a black colleague and good friend of mine, and we were stuck on the subway for about an hour and a half, as happens there. And we got into a very candid discussion about racism. I grew up in Halifax, where racial tensions were very high, particularly in the 60s and 70s. There were racial riots. There were the destruction of the black community called Africville. And Jude and I talked about my experiences as a white kid growing up in the south end of Halifax, being afraid of the black kids from the north end in Halifax. And my friend talked about his experiences working as a black guy in Halifax as well. We talked for a good hour about that. When George Floyd was murdered in the US, Jude posted something on Facebook, and I phoned him up to respond to that and to tell him how therapeutic our discussion was for me. And I wasn't even sure if he'd remember the discussion, but his response was about how therapeutic it was for him that we were able to candidly discuss our experiences. It doesn't sound like a question, but there's kind of a question there, I think, in terms of how we heal by sharing experiences and by celebrating differences. So I'd be interested in your comment on that.
Yes, and thank you for the question. Thank you so much. Definitely a little bit of a weird way to do this, but I love it, and we're making it work. I love that you bring that up, because I think for me, I went through a time, especially in 2020, where I felt a little hardened and a little maybe beaten down. And so I felt like I was putting up a wall towards celebrating differences in a really healthy way. And I think I moved through that through, of course, some therapy and conversations with my beautiful pastor. But I did find out that having those conversations, as you mentioned, in that safe kind of therapeutic space, but not all those conversations exist. Some people really do come with their backup. I did at a time too. So I think for me, like you said, those open, therapeutic conversations are really important. Now, I won't say not everyone has the same opinions as me. I will put that out there. But I think closing off to our differences doesn't necessarily always bring us together either. That's why Multicultural Festival is actually my favorite festival in Guelph, because I get to experience and learn all these different cultures and heritage that we get to joyously celebrate and acknowledge. But I think there's also work that has to be done within that, and understanding like the depths within those heritages and cultures, and maybe what they're experiencing, and listening to them. And it sounds to me like the way that you went through it came with a lot of listening, a lot of like sitting back and hearing his experiences as well, taking in the acknowledgement of like, okay, this is how you're feeling, let's talk through for both sides. But that doesn't always happen for people. So I do want to put that out there. Not everybody wants to have those conversations, because as a myself, I was just in a different position in 2020 where I just was closed off to that because I was trying to heal and work through myself still. But then when we get to the point where we can open up and have these kind of, sometimes they're not even uncomfortable. They are just a healing conversation, as you said, for us to heal past traumas, for us to work through maybe racisms that we went through or experienced towards others that we're recognizing now that maybe wasn't right, and trying to like work through that process. I myself had to do a lot of decolonization. So I really appreciate that question. And I think for yourselves, just staying open like you are to hearing people's perspectives. And I think for me, I'm trying to get to a place where we're also allowing different perspectives to exist, to then allow us to move forward into maybe what we consider now the right perspective in terms of, you know, our anti-racism work. I hope that answers the question enough. I do see an online question too. I don't know if you want me to manage that. I can.
Well, answer the question online.
Great. So online is, could you suggest one thing each of us might do today to combat racism in Guelph? Definitely. Let's see. One thing, maybe I should give you like a list of some things. I think one thing, combat racism in Guelph. So right now we do have, I'll give you two things, actually, different things. One, we do have a community plan right now that addresses, I think I spoke about it just briefly, systemic racism gaps. So what that means is it's working to address the racism and to like build equity within that, allowing conversations of relationship and trust, and to allow us to move forward. There is an equity, diversity, and Indigenous relations lead. So there are ways that you can show up, and that's either writing a letter. If it is doable for you, you can actually visit the website. And again, I'm welcome to share some of these links I've been talking about with y'all so that you can go forward with that. So you can write directly to the community plan lead about your active want to get involved in the community plan for change, and they will give you some advice and recognition around that. They're the best people to talk to. I would also put out there that right now, one of the best ways to show up is for Guelph Black Heritage. It's an easy way and a beneficial way to support Black community. With the Guelph Black Heritage, they not only have their fundraiser campaign for the Heritage Hall, they actually have an artist fund as well that helps support Black artists in Guelph to do their work, which right now they actually cut about 12% of funding in Waterloo already for funding for this year for arts. So we're really at a kind of the point where we need the support for artists. We additionally have one that can help support our youth programming that happens, again, to support Black and Indigenous and all youth who are needing that access. Excuse me. And last but not least, right now I have an initiative called Black Vacation Week, and I can send out the link for that. You can also find it online. There was a recent article with CTV that you can check out that we just did. And CBC I'm supposed to interview today with as well. And Black Vacation Week is encouraging Black individuals to take the last week of February off for themselves. So that means, and if you sign this initiative, this allows our MPPs, our MP, our councillor, our mayor to also hop on board and support this initiative. A lot of the time during Black History Month, what I find is I don't even see my brothers and sisters because we're all working and doing our thing, which is great. But I think it'd be great for us to also have a week off where we can spend time with each other, where we can see each other, where we can celebrate one another as well. And that's not all month, just the last week. It also allows us some time to just slow down a bit and recognize that we are available March 1st and onward if people need. That initiative is really supportive for us because it does allow us to get a bigger voice and a bigger noise when looking at that. And in terms of combating racism, I really encourage people, if you see it, hear it, feel it, stand up for it. It really helps when we're not alone in the fight, whether that be reporting. It's kind of dual side, because if it happens and you see a police altercation, you can report it to police, but it's still going to the same people. But it can go to a police board as a notion, and you can fill those out online or go down to the police station to report that officer if you see something not appropriate happening. I myself also had dealt with 2 incidences, so they are happening in Guelph. So really just kind of standing up, and I recognize those places aren't comfortable for everyone. So if even it's a letter to your MP, Mike Schreiner is amazing here in Guelph and Lloyd Longfield in terms of supporting our Black community. So if they hear it, they will help in designating, or email me. I'm happy to get involved. I am always happy to get involved. So thank you.
I ask Jan Epperson to come up to say thank you. The very interesting speaker.
Good girl. I did it. Tween, thank you so much for your inspiring presentation. We're sorry you couldn't be here in person today, and we do hope that you get a speedy recovery from your COVID. To hear the challenges that you faced growing up in a white community and in all of your travels have given us much insight into the faces and challenges you face today. But your courage, determination to become the woman you are today has given us much food for thought. We hope from this day forward we can all be more tolerant of our community and of our country. Thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
A beautiful thank you. Very, very nice. Thanks, Jan. Is there anything else that you would like to bring up before we adjourn? Oh, there you go. Yes.
Can you raise next month's?
I'm sorry?
Can you raise the plan for next month?
Yes, I was going to do that. Kathy, thank you for reminding me again and again and again. Next month is the Irish month. It's St. Patrick's celebration, and we are all encouraged to wear green. And there's going to be a music time where we will enjoy the music, and also we're encouraged to share some interesting little stories that we remember as we were growing up. You don't have to be Irish, you know, to remember fun things that happened to you. You can just pretend to be Irish that day, and we'll accept it. Is that good enough, Kathy? Okay. Thank you. Would someone just move to adjourn the meeting? Thank you. A second? Good. Thanks very much, everyone, and we'll see you next month, and keep well and be happy.